Okay, you are live.
Good evening. We are live this evening, and we're going to be starting our um, ad hoc for the Disciplinary Matrix today on Wednesday, October 23rd. We're joined with our esteemed colleagues here that have been getting down every Wednesday with new tasks, moving this along. It's been a tedious, but also a very fruitful task. And so just want to say good evening to everyone. Good evening, Captain Hubbard. Good to see you. And Deacon Lyles, Chair Emeritus that usually runs this meeting, is not going to be here today. So in her shoes, in her stead, I'm going to kind of try to move us along. I know there's a lot to cover, and I'm going to be pulling up the notes right now. Let me see if there's anybody in the public. As of right now, we don't have any attendees in the public, so it's just us. Um, but how is everyone doing? We ready to rock and roll tonight?
Yes. Ready to go.
All right. So Lieutenant Hubbard, I'm gonna pull it. I mean, Lieutenant, it's hard to get rid of that. Captain Hubbard, my apologies. I'm gonna kick it over to you. If you could give us an update of where we left off and where what you hope to accomplish this evening, as we continue to move through these documents.
Certainly. Thank you. I'd like to start just with going over my notes and what's been fixed since the last time we met. And I hope you can see my screen while I go over that. And then I have, I think we've been asking this for a while now, the top violations within the department. We can start going through those. Sound good?
Excellent. Excellent.
Can everyone see
Yes.
my screen there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. We talked about the oath of office, and I do not, or I could not find a reason as to why it's not posted on the website, but I have no objection to posting it. I think it should, but I'll go ahead and read it for you all. And it does differ between cities. If you go online, a lot of cities do post their oath of office. Ours, I don't know the history of it, but this is ours quite simply. I solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of California, and the Charter of the City of Oakland, and will truly and to the best of my ability perform the duties of police officer. That is officially used by the city clerk with new graduates. Usually it happens the day before their graduation, and then for ceremonial reasons, we do it at our graduation. Okay, and I will work with staff to get that posted on our website.
All right. Excellent.
Great. Moving on to 234.24, we talked about loyalty and esprit de corps. I changed it to all members. I know we had a discussion last week where it was specific to command and managers. There is still room for that debate just because the umbrella section that we were looking at had to do with commanding officers. But I did see an email from Commissioner Jackson to the chief asking for an update on that. He's out of town, so he might not be able to respond right away, but that's where we're at. Anyway, I'll go ahead and read it. All members of the OPD are expected to cultivate loyalty and unity within the department, to the city of Oakland, and most importantly, to the oath of office and police code of ethics. Esprit de corps refers to a shared pride, morale, and sense of purpose among members of the OPD. Fostering a positive and team-oriented culture means building morale, encouraging motivation, encouraging motivation and recognizing good work to promote teamwork and a positive attitude, creating unity, ensuring all members feel included, respected, and aligned with the department's mission and goals, encouraging loyalty, promoting commitment to the department and its mission while upholding the oath of office and constitutional values. So this is one significant change because we talked about loyalty and how that can be perceived as covering up things, the thin blue line, if you will. So loyalty must be directed towards the oath of office and the Constitution, not blind loyalty to the department that conflicts with the community's trust or leads to ignoring misconduct. Commanders and managers must lead by example, building a culture of integrity and accountability.
I have a question.
Certainly.
So, do you think, or are you believing that the clause building a culture of integrity and accountability places the responsibility for strategies and responses squarely with the commanders and managers?
Supervisors certainly carry a heavy weight on that for that too, and field training officers. I would say anyone who has any type of influence. I mean, we can go deeper into mentorship also. Mentors, I think, share that responsibility.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's more than leading by example. You can, in other words, you can lead by example to be a loyal commander.
Yeah.
You can be a great manager, but you look the other way.
Yeah.
When malfeasance occurs, or you don't think it's your responsibility to come up with resolutions. You don't have to come up with solutions, but how do I respond to this? What is the next strategy? That doesn't rest with an officer on beat 19.
Yeah.
That rests squarely on you, Captain Hubbard. That's your functionality in the military chain of command. So we have to say that somehow commanders and managers are not all employees. They're distinctive in that regard, that they are to think of strategy, plan, make sure we get the financing, make sure we hire the right people, make sure we discipline the right people. It's not a equal basis for every employee in the department.
They take on that burden.
Yeah, that burden is squarely, It's squarely, it's not even on the supervisory. It's on the shoulders of the supervisors to counsel, to train, to prevent people from going wrong by keeping their eye on them, and and bringing them along. But in terms of discipline and planning and strategy and how we should go, where we should go, how we can prevent this problem, that's squarely with commanders. And you got to say that it's not an equal responsibility throughout the building.
And Captain Hubbard, remind me, I know Chair Emerita had reached out to the chief around this very question of the esprit de corps, around it applying to everyone across the board, something of that nature, right? And I'm wondering how we strike that balance of and not losing the spirit of that inquiry, right? And figuring out how do you strike the balance between it's up to everybody to hold that and to reflect that, but it's up to to what Deacon Lyles is saying right here, to the command staff to inherently be the ones that shoulder that burden, to make sure that to have stronger language around their responsibility around that. If you get what I'm saying,
they got to come up with the resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Officer Smith doesn't have to come up with resolutions. He's supposed to go out there and patrol, arrest, take reports. That's his primary function, but
take those directions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost see it as moving this to the top of this, where the framework of loyalty and esprit de corps is established by the leaders of this organization, and that's through strategy, etc.
It is distinctive.
Yeah,
that's what I want to say. I'm trying to say to you that responsibility is distinctively the responsibility of command staff and chief of police.
Right. So we establish it, and then it goes on to say that it's really, I mean, we get people who just don't accept it either. Like we have the framework of morale and unity, and then there's some people, I don't need any of that.
Well, that's fine. We're not going to manage the department based on the malcontents,
right?
They're going to always be there. There's no way of eliminating that and that attitude. But what happens is that we can't abdicate the responsibility and turn it over to some guy who's popular, but he's he's a motorcycle officer, but he's a popular guy, got a great following, but he's not the chief, he's not the captain. He's not the lieutenant. See, if the captains and lieutenants and deputy chiefs are saying, hey, we're all in this together, then we ought to pay you all the same.
Right. Yeah, no disagreement. So I think I'll move that to the top and rework that, and then hopefully it'll flow better from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah, I like it.
All righty.
Okay, discipline and morale. Commanders and managers are responsible for maintaining discipline and morale within their command, ensuring a positive and accountable work environment. This includes investigating assigned misconduct complaints and the proper disposition of such complaints. Responsibilities include discipline, upholding standards of conduct, and enforcing policies to ensure proper behavior and accountability across the command. Morale, promoting a positive, respectful environment where members feel motivated, supported, and aligned with the department's mission and values. Investigation of misconduct, thoroughly investigating assigned complaints of misconduct to ensure accountability and fairness. Disposition of complaints, ensuring that the resolution and disposition of misconduct complaints are handled appropriately based on the investigation's findings while maintaining transparency and integrity. Managers and managers are expected to foster an environment where discipline supports morale and ensure that complaints are investigated with professionalism, leading to fair and just outcomes. The biggest change with this, I think I should have highlighted it, but it was really specific to, it was almost like a half a circle. It was like, look out for disciplinary actions, but then there was no follow through to what happens with that, to include the disposition of that. The disposition with discipline is a big topic now. It's been for actually many years, insofar as the union actually put it in the contract where captains need to serve discipline. Because what happened before is discipline was served by leaving it on the officer's desk or something, and they would show up on Monday, they would pick up a document saying, oh, I just got disciplined for something, and they had no idea the context. There's no accountability, responsibility. So now it's, no, you're in charge of that, and you need to mentor and have a discussion with people so they don't do it again. So that's what this section's about.
Well, that speaks to what we were talking about earlier. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's abdicating responsibility. I'm not responsible for esprit de corps. I don't have to coach a person up. I don't have to discipline anybody. I'll just drop a nasty letter on his desk anonymously.
Right.
What kind of?
I know.
I would be ashamed.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I'm glad we got it fixed. It's not perfect, but it's much better than what it used to be.
And the important part is creating that feedback loop to be able to have that conversation, that coaching opportunity.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This one, I didn't have any changes. This is the confusing one, and we did a revised statement. So I have no changes on that unless you want to talk about it. It's just interdivisional action, just promoting harmony and ensuring that there's, if there's an emergency, that I can pull resources without having to ask permission and a lot of red tape, but effective communication. So I'm just going to move on from that. Maintenance, commanders and managers must ensure that all facilities, equipment, supplies, and materials under their command are used properly, maintained in good condition, and not altered in any way that compromises their intended function. Regular inspections are required to ensure compliance and prevent unauthorized changes. Commanders are responsible for the following. Ensuring all members use facilities, equipment, and materials as intended without misuse, neglect, or damage. Overseeing the regular upkeep of resources such as vehicles, safety equipment, and electronic devices to keep them in optimal working condition. No unauthorized alterations. Preventing unauthorized modifications to work issued items, such as changing the configuration of work cell phones or altering safety equipment, which could impair effectiveness or compromise safety. And then also, this was a big topic last week, commanding officers must conduct regular inspections to ensure all resources are correctly maintained for its use.
There's another bullet that needs to go in there.
Sure.
And that bullet is that managers, commanding officer managers have to ensure that officers are adequately supplied with the tools to do an effective job. So you don't send nobody out on the street to if you don't have a bulletproof vest, or you don't
Sure.
send anybody out on the street with not enough bullets, or or you don't have enough gas in the car, so you got to buy your own gas. So the responsibility is not the officer doesn't equip themselves. The commanding officers ensures that they are equipped, and then takes the initiative to go through the chain of command in the city to make sure the resources are there to equip the adequately equipped officers to do their jobs.
Yep, I like it. I will add that for next week. That's great. Okay. All right. This one, the only note I have here is this is just communication up and down the chain. I could have sworn that we had a policy on this, which is really interesting. So this basically says, well, I'll go ahead and read it. Preparation and a review of required correspondence, reports, and maintenance of records relating to the activities of his or her command. Ensure that information is communicated up and down the chain of command. But there's no policy. So I'm really struggling with the background of this and how we hold people accountable just by this sentence or sentences alone. And with emails, texting, social media, everything else that we can do to communicate with each other, there should be a policy.
I agree. What
Yeah.
now? I didn't catch something. Forgive me. Reports, AD records. What is that? Discipline records? What's
And
AD?
Yeah, it's and record. Sorry.
Okay.
Missed a letter there. Yeah.
Reports and records.
Yeah.
Preparation and or review of required correspondence reports and maintenance records with activities. You don't have a policy on it. So there you go. If you don't have a policy, then I don't have to tell you that this officer is a member of the,
yeah,
whatever nefarious organization. I don't have to tell you that. You have to discover it for yourself. No, this is horrible.
Yeah.
It's bad. You got to have a policy for that. And it's the responsibility of the supervisor and commanding officers to make sure that kind of information is shared.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, is this more like in the spirit of the see something, say something type of thing?
That's already established in our discipline policy. This speaks to general information that needs to be, as part of my job, communicated to my team, and it goes up and down. Sometimes.
Now, do you think there's no policy because it's just like common sense, like, oh, if this, yeah, but it seems like there should be something though.
There should be, yeah. It's hard. I really struggle with this because I need to do more research to see what best practices are. But I looked a little bit further back and to why these are established. I was not in the military, but I know they have a lot of military influence with these, and having that understanding, it's like, okay, in the military, I got it. We're not a militaristic organization, but a lot of our authors back in the day of policies had that mindset. And so this is definitely one of them. But at the same time, it's evolved because, like, email alone, it can be just overwhelming with information and things can get missed as a result. So striking a balance between those.
Well, we want to err in the side of giving out too much information, not in investigations or confidential stuff, but we don't want to have a paucity of information and assume that officers understand something. We don't want to assume any of that. We don't operate on assumption, and police departments aren't militaristic and should not be, but they are paramilitaristic. Same chain of command, the same communication ethics have to be established. It is the responsibility. Let me just ask a redundant, kind of rhetorical question. Is it the responsibility for a beat officer to inform another beat officer about some danger somewhere? I think he should. I think he ought to do it. But the fact that there's something dangerous and out there affecting the department and its personnel, it's the responsibility of supervisors and commanding officers. If an officer says, you know, I didn't know that, I didn't understand that to be a threat, you can't discipline the officer for that.
Right.
But you may be able to tell a lieutenant, well, why didn't you research it? Why didn't you go into it?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. So I'll have to do more work on this one, but this one's interesting to me.
A lot of dodgeball playing, you know.
Yeah.
Not my job. It's not my job.
Chair Kathy Leonard just joined. Welcome, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
All right. 342. I know we had a lot of discussion on this one. Members and employees are responsible for the proper care of department property and equipment assigned to or used by them. If an officer is found culpable, the officer shall be responsible for reimbursing the city of Oakland. Remember, it changed to should versus to shall or could. The following shall subject the responsible individual to reimbursement charges and or appropriate disciplinary action to the extent allowed by the law. Major vehicle collisions based on the degree of damage and or negligence. Minor vehicle collisions based on the degree or damage and or negligence. Improper use of property or equipment. Improper care of property or equipment. Failure to carry required property or equipment. Misappropriation or misuse of property or equipment, damage or lost property or equipment, and improperly securing weapons. In cases where department property is found with unreported damage, it will be presumed that the last person to use the property or vehicle is culpable unless otherwise demonstrated. I did put this in here. Considerations for intentional versus unintentional actions will be assessed, and indemnification may be explored, depending on the circumstances. We'll definitely have to have the city attorney weigh in on this one for further discussion, because there's a lot of the intentional versus unintentional, negligence versus not. That's always challenging. Okay.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at notes. It looks like you've included everything we talked about.
Yeah. Care of city or department buildings. Members and employees shall not mar, mark, or deface any surface. So there was a question on surface last week. I put in here examples: walls, floors, doors, windows, furniture or fixtures. I would just say anything really within the department. In any city or department building, no materials, posters, notices, signs, decorations shall be affixed to any wall or surface in a city or department building without specific authorization from a commanding officer.
Now, would this also include, and I don't know, I just had this thought now, the social media realm, in terms of, like, I guess nowadays, like, message boards look different, right? In terms of posting, you know, things that they're not supposed to be posting. Is there somewhere in a digital or electronic policy that you all have that might be covered?
It wouldn't fit in this section because this is specific to buildings. However,
facilities.
If I post something that brings disrepute to the department, or it could be AI 71 related, which is harassment, discrimination, that would be a different section. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we will definitely cover that in our time together. That will come up.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
This is somewhat, I guess, related to your question. This is notices 342. Members and employees shall not mark, alter, or deface any posted notice of the department. Notices or announcements shall not be posted on bulletin boards without the permission of a commanding officer. No notices of derogatory, discriminatory nature as defined in city administrative instruction 71 shall be posted. So this is again specific to something tangible that you can post, but getting there to where social media posts can certainly be a violation. Okay, so we had a lot of discussion on this also. This is about department vehicles. Members and employees shall not use any department vehicle without the explicit permission of a commanding officer. Departmental vehicles include marked police vehicles, motorcycles, dual purpose motorcycles, professional staff vehicles, unmarked vehicles, and rental vehicles as defined in DGO I2 departmental fleet. I know there was a question about boats. I got to look at the policy again. I don't think that explicitly says it. I think it's more implied because it's some type of vehicle, if you will. But that's worth considering. The fleet unit is responsible for managing the assignment, maintenance, and inspection of all city-owned vehicles, and any unauthorized use of these vehicles may result in disciplinary action. Yeah, so I wanted to sync up our policy on that. We do have a policy that says that there's only certain people in positions that are allowed to take home their work vehicle because they're always on call, but for the most part, that's not true. So therefore, if I were to want to take home a vehicle, I would have to get authorization or use it. So let's say I use the example of, outside the scope of my job, I want to use a city vehicle. That needs to be approved.
Okay.
And sometimes
I know we talked about drones too, I think, like taking drones home or unauthorized use of drones.
Yeah, so that would be care of property. I'll come back to that. I think that's in the next batch of a lot of sustained cases regarding that, but that might be required just as a separate section as we assess it. Let me put a note to myself here, look into that. Okay, so that takes care of the MRs that we discussed thus far. I have some more work to do on this, but if there are no other questions, we can move on to the top 10 or top violations.
Sure. Want to take a moment. Any questions? Kathy, welcome. We were just to recap, reviewing the edits from the discussion from last week. And so the updated language that Captain Hubbard made on since we last met. Yeah, I think we're good. We could go ahead and start jumping into those top 10. And these are in no particular order, right? These are
no particular order. This was actually relatively easy for me to find because this comes up in our risk management meetings that we hold monthly. So this is directly from the Internal Affairs Bureau. Before I get to the violations, this one is actually our top one. So these are called service complaints. I'll give you the definition and see if we want to talk about that further. This is a complaint from any source regarding an inadequate policy, procedure, practice, service level, or legal standard or statute required of the department that would not result in discipline. So this is basically a service complaint. Sorry, a service complaint is not an allegation of misconduct. So the most common one that we see is delayed response. So officers, there are sometimes hundreds calls standing. The worst I've seen was 500 calls standing at one point, but usually anything over 100 is not a good situation for us. But sometimes the wait is lengthy and yes, unfair, but not necessarily controlled by the officer or dispatcher. It just has to go with what priorities we have in the city. And sometimes people complain by saying, hey, I had to wait 3 days for an officer to come and take a burglary report, and they want to make a complaint against that officer. However, it's not necessarily the officer's fault. It's hey, they get dispatched and they respond. So we call those service complaints. There's some danger zones here, of course, where the officer, let's say, refuses to go or doesn't go for whatever reason. That would not be a service complaint. That would be performance of duty. So it's not that we just automatically disregard them. There is an assessment to see if it actually is indeed a service complaint. Some other complaints just don't fall into an manual of rules. Like, so for example, someone says, "Hey, I just don't like your uniform. It's too blue." That would be considered a service complaint because there's no manual of rules violation attached to it.
Got it.
So that technically is our number one complaint that we get, technically, even though there's no foundation behind it. So we might want to come back to that, but that's the definition. So number one, service complaint, no manual of rules based on the. So the next one is performance of duty, unintentional, improper search, seizure, or arrest. This is manual of rules 31439. And let me pull up the manual of rules so we can actually read it. Pull up my other screen here. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that manual of rules? Maybe not. Let me see here. Yeah, okay. So this is performance of duty. Now, this is an important one for us to talk about because this is somewhat of a catch-all, if you will. They try their best to define this, but sometimes and I'll explain it further, but sometimes if we just don't know where to place things, sometimes it just falls within this realm. So performance of duty is all members and employees shall perform their assigned duties and responsibilities as required or directed by law, departmental rule, policy, ordered by a competent authority. Each member and employee is accountable for the exercise and delegated authority and shall not conceal, divert, or mitigate their true culpability. Violations of performance of duty include, but are not limited to, the following: intentional illegal search, seizure, arrest, unintentional or improper search, seizure, or arrest, planning of evidence, failure to perform duties as required or directed by law. I'll come back to that. Departmental rule, policy, or order, improper care of property of persons, and changing a work assignment without authority. So in this particular section, it's actually deeper than just performance of duty. It's the unintentional, improper search, seizure, arrest. So the reason why this is our number two highest complaint is because we get a lot of complaints just based on the mere arrest of someone, and that's probably understandable. And where we don't necessarily result, it doesn't necessarily result in a finding. Could be, for example, we have a policy that mandates arrest for domestic violence. So if a wife accuses a husband of spousal battery, our policy says that the officer shall make that arrest. So the officer goes to the scene, the spouse says this, we make that arrest, and then they file a complaint saying that they improperly arrested us or me. We investigate it and determine if there was indeed probable cause. But just by that alone, the number is very high for complaints. Any questions on that in this definition?
Pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah. Another example that we see commonly, individuals who are suffering from a mental health crisis. And that's not just our observations. It could be directed by macro, for example, or family members by saying, hey, this person is unable to care for themselves or others. Then we detain them under the Welfare Institutions Code 5150. And we get a lot of complaints based on that. Yeah.
And when we track performance of duty complaints, I assume they get parsed out by these performance violations, like the type, the specifics of what they are. Since you said the performance of duty is kind of a catch-all too.
It does, yeah. And so this bullet point kind of is really the all-encompassing failure to perform duties as required or directed by law, departmental rule, policy, or order. And I'll give you an example. So we have a policy DGO-M as in Mary 4, and it lists all the things that officers have to do for a preliminary investigation. So let's say that your car is stolen and I'm the officer arriving on scene and I need to investigate that. In there, I have to do a canvas, as in I have to go to your neighbors, knock on the door and see if they saw or heard anything. If I missed that step, then I technically violated that policy. So if we're looking for a section to put that in, it's like, no, you did not perform the duties as required in policy, which is for you to conduct a canvas. So that's where it's not a singular isolated definition. It's just kind of an all-encompassing, hey, you didn't perform your duty properly.
Gotcha.
And as you can see here, that allegation and that sustained finding is far different than the planting of evidence, which would be a terminating offense and possible criminal charges. So, yeah, the discipline range is definitely much more severe depending on the circumstances.
Sense.
Yeah. Another example, since we're on the subject, we sometimes get these improper care of property of persons. So if we arrest someone and we recover an item from them to then give back to them in a custodial environment and we lose it, then it would fall under this. I did not care properly for I didn't care for their property properly. Yeah. Okay. All right. Number 3 is performance of duty general. This is 31439.2. I'll go ahead and find that for us. Sorry. Yeah, so it's the same section. The reason why, I'm sorry, I was confusing myself is because I was looking for the general section. So this would be it. So again, we get a lot of these, the 4th bullet point. So one of the things to discuss, and I think this is one of the reasons why we established this ad hoc, is if I may just pause here, I don't think we as a department or city or all of you want to just automatically respond with discipline. So let's just take it for what it is, where an officer I see when I'm reviewing the report did not do an adequate preliminary investigation. Now there's 2 ways I can handle this. I can immediately report it to internal affairs, knowing that it's likely to be a sustained case because they clearly missed this in their investigation, or I can take a leadership role and I can mentor, I can train them, and I can monitor them to ensure that it doesn't happen again. For something like that example, it does not have to be reported to internal affairs. Assuming that it's not a pattern of misconduct, I can treat it what we call as a class 2 offense. And I can do what I described: train, mentor, monitor, rehabilitate, and ensure it does not happen again. And that's more the mentorship phase. All this, of course, is documented. We talked about vision. It's a vision system that we enter these things in. And I talk about everything that I did to hold myself accountable for this mentorship, supervision, oversight. And then I document it. So if another supervisor catches it and another supervisor catches it, then it would be a different outcome where it'd be a pattern internal affairs notification. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm giving space for other folks maybe to chime in or have questions. I mean, how do we ensure though that discretion doesn't become a slippery slope either, and doesn't get abused the other way, right? And so there has to be a checks and balance for that then supervisor to make sure that he's putting in those notes, that there are coaching opportunities, right? That they're showing that they've exhausted all of their opportunities to instruct and coach and to mentor.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this gets to our discussion about patterns. And we talked about this with the commission. I am writing a policy with, of course, the help of the city attorney's office. It's V as in Victor, T as in Tom 3. And I can give you a copy of this. I can easily be biased against an employee by not mentoring them, not training them, and just submitting everything to internal affairs. I can easily do that. And I wanted to change that to where, no, there's a structure in place where it's like, no, you shall use the mentorship training and document it and be fair across the board to all employees. I can say to one officer, I like you, I'm going to mentor you, but I can say to another officer, I don't like you, I'm going to submit your case to internal affairs. So that's going to come in a policy change because we technically don't have one that really delineates that and creates a structure. Yeah. And in that, if I can answer your other question, would be the mandate that the supervisor, for every type of scenario like that, they have to make an entry. It's not a, you do what you want. It's like, no, if you're gonna sit down and counsel someone over what they did, you have to make that entry so another supervisor, including yourself, can hold them accountable. Yeah. Okay. Next one is use of force comparable to a level 4. In short, level 1 is the most severe use of force, and level 4 is the least severe use of force, but it's still considered a use of force. So let's go over that. 370.27. Okay. So quite simply, physical use of force, the use of physical force level 1 through 4 shall be restricted to circumstances specified by departmental policies and law. So we have a use of force policy, DGOK3. I know the commission was very involved in that process, and we have many kind of spin-off policies, if you will, that attach to that with other mandates. We get these complaints because sometimes there's force that is hopefully objectively reasonable when affecting an arrest, and people subsequently complain. There are 2 investigations that go into this. If there is a use of force at any level, there is automatic supervisory review. The more severe, then it becomes a higher level of review with more robust, to include a force board, if you will, with commanders who actually do a deep dive into it. But taking it for what it is for a level 4, let's say that I twist someone's wrist to gain compliance to then apply the handcuffs or effect an arrest. They say, hey, you twisted my hand, and I think it's unjustifiable. The complaint allegation would be this, 370.27. So then the question that would have to be investigated by the department is, 1, did the officer use force, yes or no? And if they did, was it objectively reasonable with the law and also compliant with their policies? And that summarizes that section.
What DGO number was that again?
K3, K as in King 3. That's our use of force policy.
Cool.
Any questions on that? Conduct towards others, demeanor, 314.07. Another big one for us. Okay, a little bit longer. Conduct towards others, demeanors. Members and employees shall perform their duties attentively and courteously, avoiding rude, threatening, harsh, insulting, insolent, or demeaning language, and they shall maintain a professional bearing regardless of provocation or to do otherwise. Members and employees shall treat superior officers, subordinates, and peers with respect. They shall be courteous and civil at all times in their relationships with one another and shall avoid any inappropriate conduct. All persons except the very youthful and those known personally by the member or employee shall at all times be addressed by their appropriate title followed by their last name. When on duty and in the presence of other superior officers shall be referred to by rank title. Members and employees shall attend to requests from the public quickly and accurately, avoiding unnecessarily referral to other parts of the department. Orders from superior to subordinate members and employees shall be given in a civil manner without the use of profane or derogatory language. So the reason why this is, I think, worthy of our discussion is as you read this, it almost reads more internal than external. How we treat each other, which is great. We do need that. But what we use this for also is, and this is just really without these bullet points falling into this section right here. If an officer swears, whether they're swearing at a person or uses profanity, then demeanor, conduct towards other demeanor would be applicable. Rudeness, just overall harshness, demeaning language, assuming it's not discriminatory, which would be a different section. Conduct towards other demeanor is an often alleged violation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it doesn't specifically and doesn't have an intentionality around the department's demeanor towards the general public and community, right? And those expectations. So I and in the same vein of, referring to ranking officers with their appropriate title, right? Also in the community, like using, respectful terms such as ma'am, sir, miss, things like that of that nature. And I think, maybe it would be important to spell that out here.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be happy to work on that some more. Yeah. The other thing that's with that is, and this is debated, is slang. An officer, if you read Dr. Eberhardt's report, the difference in how officers address certain races, for example, sir, I pulled you over for this reason versus, hey, my man, I pulled you over for this reason, or hey, bro, I pulled you over for this reason. There's argument over whether that's a demeanor issue, but we really set the standard. It's like, no, you treat everyone equally and you don't call people bro, my man, etc. So that is something that it took a few years for us to get there, but we've certainly seen an improvement of that. And that's something that supervisors have to look for when they're reviewing body worn camera, regardless of the investigation or why they're looking at it.
Any other thoughts on this section?
I think that's appropriate. I really do. Yeah. And they can't use the language of the streets because they're not of the streets. They're there to protect and to serve the streets. So it's got to be professional language.
Yeah. So I'm going to work on that. It's common, and rudeness is hard because it can be very subjective. And we talk about, leadership. I can be overly subjective to certain employees by saying, hey, you're rude, versus others where I can say, it's okay. And getting us on a page consistently for this, I think, is essential for this organization. Sometimes officers and dispatchers have to be stern with people, and it can be construed as rudeness. And we have many internal debates over that. But there's no room for profanity, derogatory terms, slang. There's no need for that.
The other, the other side of the coin that I hear a lot of complaints about is, especially with dispatchers, that people call and for requests for service, and they get the bad news that we don't have anybody to send, or calm down, tell me what's going on, lower your voice, stop screaming. But they don't understand that the victim is under duress. Their life may be jeopardized, their children, or something like that, their property. So they're excited, and then you get these thin-skinned officers that, okay, if you can't talk to me like I want to hear you talk to me, then I don't have to listen to you. Not right. You're serving them. They don't have to come to you with the Queen's English and etiquette. They're under duress. They're calling for service, or they need service. So officers and dispatch have to understand that. When I was, this is years ago, when I was in the business, they used to say that officers' peace cannot be disturbed.
Yeah.
But so that's something to work on. An excitable person under a certain situation is to be expected.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Part of what I'm saying that made me think about too is, and I don't know if we've spelled this out in some of these sections that we've talked about, but as equal as we're putting the onus on supervisory staff and command staff to like really ensure the culture, the values, like everything from conduct, right, and all this stuff, right, that we know that there's a certain level of responsibility that goes on them as well. I think we also need to be sensitive and call out that when there are those teachable moments, right, there's also a reflective process of what's going on with that person, right? And so I think there's a certain level of coaching even that supervisor needs as well, to be able to ask those tough questions, of how they can support, right? Because if you have a cop that's always consistent, and then they have some slip ups here and there, and you have those coaching opportunities, then what, we also want to make sure that that responsibility and that supervisor supported with making certain calls that may be tough calls, to be able to support that officer in those moments as well too, and have it not be seen as something that's that's deficient, or that they'll get in trouble from, because all of us have bad days sometimes, right? And we need to be able to have and be able to name those when they are there, and then be able to get back to what that standard is. And so I think that balance really does fall on that supervisory staff to be able to strike that. So, and I think, and I think that part of what just made me think about that is just, just keep always thinking about just the wellness of officers, right? And carrying the responsibility. And I don't know, something maybe just Deacon just said right now about like always having to have your game face on, and always having to have that customer service on, and having that standard be so high, and that expectation, especially, as a commission, hey, we're tough on that, right? We want to make sure, yes, that customer service is always on 110%. But then also being very sensitive to those conversations and the impact of that burden when they're not on off duty, right, in the locker room, when behind the scenes, right, and that is the duty of that supervising staff, to be able to take on those extra conversations in those settings as well. That's not in public, right, that we don't see all the time.
Yeah, certainly. No, I like that. Thank you. That's really going to speak to that policy. I'm updating VTO3. That's going to be heavy on that. Yeah, thank you. All right. Another one. Department property and equipment, preventable collision. So kind of touched on this. So this is a little bit different than what we already talked about, but in the same family. So department property and equipment members and employees are responsible for the proper care of department property and equipment assigned or used to them. So this is I highlighted may because that's what we want to change the shall. If there is, so there's two avenues here. For every collision, it needs to be reported. There is then there's automatically an investigation into it. It's completed initially by the supervisor, who is assumably the one who arrives on scene. And then you have our traffic division, who does their assessment based on their training. And what they're trying to determine is whether it was preventable or not preventable. Preventable example would be, the most common is the officer employee backs into something. Usually it's a pole. Usually there are another vehicle, but they're not paying attention. The non-preventable would be, it's a fault of someone else. So they're basically party two. The officer's driving, someone runs a stop sign and collides into the officer. So it would be a complaint, and this is why this is so high. So regardless of whether it's preventable or not preventable, there's a complaint that's lodged because we're investigating departmental property and equipment. It would not be reconciled or determined until the investigation is complete whether the officer or member is at fault or not. So that's why these are so high. So I don't want anyone to think that there's just straight negligence, because more times than not, it's not. It's usually a non-preventable accident. Any questions on that? I can tell you that in the academy, when I used to be there, overseeing that, driving is the thing that kept me up at night is driving. Because it's more likely that one would hurt someone or get hurt by their driving than use of force or anything else in their career. In California Post is interesting because they only require 40 hours of our 26-week academy. They only require 40 hours of training minimally. We, of course, double that because we need it. And people say, well, how's it like in the academy with all the high-speed driving? I'm like, no. There is a component of that. It's the slow speed driving that I really harp on. I want to know that recruit can back appropriately, without hitting things, parallel park, etc., even under stress. So this remains to be a high manual rules violation for us, or allegation.
Not to mention a lot of the young recruits, right? I mean, under 25 drivers are the most risk drive. I have young kids too, and it's just like this is my biggest fears too. Yeah, is there do you all track like maybe the disparities between under 25 drivers and over 25, and just attribute it to like part of their brain literally isn't quite developed yet, right? Which also makes me think about all these policies too, and having to digest all these policies, and your frontal lobe cortex still developing too. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, there was, I think we talked about this before, but there was a bill in California to not allow one to be a police officer until they're like 24. I think that's the FBI, I think, requires the age of 24. So that's part of it. I mean, if you can't rent a car until you're 24, here you are as a police officer. There's also a bill for one to have minimally a bachelor's degree, but and yes, we do track age of the officer. The other thing that we've noticed over the years is, as their personal vehicles progress, where they're basically driving it for them, even parallel parking, they get here to work, and we do not we teach to use your mirrors and your eyes, not a backup camera or any of the other technologies that maybe they're not used to that. So we really spend a lot of time on very slow speed, basic driving that, we were all taught many years ago before the car drove you. Yeah. And these cars are so expensive to the city of Oakland, to the taxpayers, and I just cringe every time we lose another vehicle.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Stresses me out just talking about it. Okay. All right. Along the same lines, this is Cara property, similar. So you see, this is a repeat of performance of duty. Cara property, I'll go back to it just so we can see it. I'll give you the common ones that we see. So it's this one right here. So I talked about just losing items. Sometimes you have officers who will remove items from someone during, let's say, a search. They'll put it on top of their patrol vehicle and then forget about it and drive away. And the cell phone, let's say, is now gone. So they would then be assumed to be sustained for that after an investigation. And so we do get a lot of those. This is what I consider to be a very hard deviation from what we train in the academy, because whenever we perform a search or caring for someone, we consolidate all their items into a pouch, a bag, and then something changes when they graduate the academy, and they get a little bit loose with it. So that is something we're always trying to rein them back in. It's like, no, that's not what we trained. You have to care for one's property, no matter what you think the value is. So we do get a lot of allegations and sustained findings for that.
Do we track disparities in that? I mean, could this be a procedural justice issue, right? And, some high-end shooting and property, I don't care about that, but somebody's property in Montclair, I know they're going to ask me for it, so I got to make sure I don't lose it.
Yeah, certainly. That is, it's somewhat ingrained in the actual investigation, because for something like that, there will have to be an interview of the officer. Like I said, we talk about these things at our risk management meetings, and our next one is next Tuesday, by the way. I think you got that invite. You'll see what we talk about. And when we do talk about, let's say, Cara property, and the captain will say, yeah, this officer's been sustained 3 times for Cara property. The follow-up question that will be from the chief and myself, others, is there a disparity that's attached to that? Like, why is that? Is it carelessness, or is there something more going on? And that, yeah, those risk management meetings, which happen at the end of the month, that's heavy discussion. Okay. Moving right along here. All right. Similar to what we talked about, this is a use of physical force comparable to a level 2. So this is Manual of Rules 370. I'll go to that. Okay, so this is back. So let me just describe what a level 2 is. A level 2 is a much more severe use of force. There's a lot of things. It can be a strike to the head, the face. Let's say I punch someone in the face. That's a level 2. If there is injury, that's like a broken bone, that's as a result of the use of force, regardless of the force level, that's a level 2. So let's say I just merely twist someone's wrist to gain compliance, and as a result, I break their hand or wrist. It would not be a level 4, it would be a level 2. If I strike someone with an impact weapon, that would be a level 2. Those are all just examples. They're certainly not as high as level 4s and level 3s, but we do get them. And inherently, there is a complaint that's attached to it. It's investigated. Let me talk about the paths here. If there's no verbal complaint by the subject, which would then go into an internal affairs investigation, we still investigate the force and the justification of it. That is reviewed by, it's investigated by the immediate sergeant. It's reviewed by the first line commander, which is usually a lieutenant. It is also reviewed by the chain of command captain. That then is then forwarded to a use of force board that's an independent body internally that does a complete review of the entire incident. It's made up of sometimes a deputy chief, but mainly captains. There's 3 of them. The city attorney's present, and it's almost like a deposition where the investigating sergeant comes in and does a formal presentation on the use of force, their findings. They review all the body worn camera. They bring in subject matter experts to talk about the force, and then a finding is rendered, either in compliance or out of compliance. If it's out of compliance, then it gets forwarded to internal affairs, and internal affairs then would sustain this for this section for a level 2 use of force. If it's in compliance, it is what it is. However, there's usually some follow-up to go with it. Like, nobody's ever perfect. Sometimes the tactics of the officer could be improved. Sometimes their body worn camera is not activated promptly, all those different things. Sometimes it's demeanor. Those are addressed also, and then there's the case is closed. So it's a very lengthy process, sometimes 6 months to a year of investigation and review. Yeah. So that's the context of that section.
And the difference between this one and the other one was just the level.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Cool. All right, number 9. Moving along.
Okay, conduct towards other. This is more severe. This is harassment, discrimination, or profiling by race or ethnicity. This is 31404. Okay, so this one's more severe because this is not just rudeness. This is more specific to harassment and discrimination. I'll go ahead and read this entire thing. Members and employees shall treat all persons with courtesy and respect. The department has a 0 tolerance policy for harassment and discrimination against members, employees, and persons on the basis of race, religion, national origin, marital status, age, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, physical or mental disability, or medical condition. The department prohibits conduct that violates a specific city administrative instruction. That's 71. Any member or employee who harasses, discriminates against a member, employee, or a person, or engages in any appropriate workplace conduct that violates 71 shall be subject to severe disciplinary action, including discharge from the city service. Any member or employee who has knowledge that another member or employee has engaged in harassment or discrimination or inappropriate conduct that violates this specific section, that's 71, is strictly charged with the responsibility for reporting that conduct in accordance with the provisions of Manual Rules Section 31448. This is reporting violations of laws, ordinances, rules, and orders. Now, the issue with this section, and we talked about this before in our other ad hoc, is that you read this as an AI 71. So this is discrimination, harassment amongst each other, among city employees. What this does not address specifically is racial profiling. Now, we settled that with our new M19 policy that I believe got ratified, I believe in the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, the commission meetings, where now there's a separate manual of rules section for racial profiling, or soon will be once that actually gets rolled out. So again, AI 71 specific to internal, and I can give you all examples. So sexual harassment would fall into this category. Any type of hostile work environment at work would fall into this section also. So the reason why, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say there wouldn't be a need to reference M19 in this section right here. Because it'll be its own separate section.
It will. And what's important though is you'll see, I have to look at the number, but I think I maybe just added 314.0 something. It's going to change. So you won't get a lot of these now. So what happens is we don't have a category for external, my conduct towards someone else. So if someone says you stopped me because of my race, that would technically fall under this section right now, because it's harassment, it's discrimination allegation. it would fall in here. But the argument, of course, is, well, that's only for internal, but we still have held people accountable for this. The new section that we came up with, the other ad hoc, would kind of clarify that, where if you're accusing me of harassment, it would fall under DGO M19. It's under that section, which would then the new policy would reference. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
The other thing note here, which is interesting, and I just now found this out, the city of Oakland has an equal opportunity unit, EEOC, I believe it's called. And they are, for every other entity of the city, they do these investigations, but they allow us as the police department to do our own. So if there's an allegation of AI 71 violation, I do, by policy and city policy, need to notify them, but they say, yes, UOPD can go ahead and investigate that, because we're a competent authority to do so and experience in doing so. And we would do this investigation. If it's high profile enough, sometimes it would be outsourced to a different firm. Okay.
Competent authority is a OPD term, right? And competent doesn't mean you have the knowledge and ability to do that. You're competent to do it. It means you are in the line of the chain of command and have the responsibility and authority to do it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So why don't we say that? Because competent, I first time I heard it was, I don't know, about half an hour ago, and I said, competent authority. What are they really trying to say here? And it seems like you're talking to each other as opposed to talking to the citizens. So they have an expectation and you have an expectation, and you're both on the same page, so to speak. So a competent authority is not someone who can do it. It's someone who has the responsibility and the authority to do whatever that task is, right?
That's right.
So if I'm taking an order from a competent authority, I've been out of law enforcement for a long time, decades, but I'm sure I'm still competent at some things.
Sure.
But you know what I mean? But I don't have the right or the authority to tell some Oakland officer what to do and what not to do. So we got to find a different way of calling that. And so you're talking to the citizens and not to each other. So what is so esoteric?
Yeah, I don't disagree. So it's funny that you say that, because I could have sworn in POBAR, that's a Police Officer Bill of Rights, there is, I think that I wouldn't say defined, but let's I'll use an example. The discipline process, like when does the timer start for 3304, which is year? Okay.
1 year.
Yeah. I believe it says when a competent authority, that term, becomes aware within the department, that's when the clock starts.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's defined of like what that really means. Like, what do you mean competent authority?
Okay. Now I'm not trying to sound conspiratorial, but again, it's the urge to only talk to the inside group. We want to have the language our own. And so the people who we serve, if they're unaware of what these terminologies mean, then they don't know, they can't govern us.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we want to change that, right?
Yeah.
That's what we want to get away from. And we've had study after study after study, Everhart, all of them saying that's what needs to happen. So these are they're not always giant steps. They're steps like this. Who are we talking to? We're talking to the officers only? No, we're talking to the officers and the citizens. We want them to understand, because after all, they're the one who pay our salaries. I know police don't like to hear that, but that's the truth.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, no, yeah.
So it's not always giant steps. These are inch long. So competent authority, I don't know what that means. You know,
I will gladly research that. I'll enjoy that.
yeah. And just because it's in 3304 doesn't mean they have to be, in OPD's language.
Right.
We want to do something different, or we
Mhm.
should, after all that happened.
Okay, I will look into that. I like that. All right. Okay, that is our top 9, top
Okay.
violated. Sorry, that was all I was prepared for. I didn't think we would even get through that list as quick as we did. I don't know if I mean I could send this out. I do have some follow-up work to do, but is some of it you just want to digest a little bit more because maybe your first time reading it. We can, but
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think this is a good place for us to go ahead and pause and digest this all. And for the next batch, what would be your sense for the count for the next one? We're looking like at another 10, 15 at a time, possibly.
I think so. I would say some of these, as you saw tonight, kind of have subcategories that we really didn't delve into. So if you take 314, for example, it says 39, but there's other 314 sections. And I think maybe if I go back up to the top, let's take 314 and just kind of break down each one. I think that's a good starting spot. Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, I think we could go ahead and do that. Let me see. I just want to do a quick check. I'm sorry. I want us to make sure that there's not anything in the chat. Anybody with their hands up?
No,
Miss
we don't.
Leonard, any thoughts before we go ahead and close out?
No, but thank you for asking. Is there anything that I can review prior to the next ad hoc meeting?
I'm sorry, I didn't have your email. And so you probably, what I typically do is I take notes from what we talked about and try to update that by Friday. I was a little bit delayed this week, but by Friday of this week, just to give you the weekend to digest it. So for this week, and I can get your email from Micah if you don't mind, so you don't have to put it on.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
please get it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
And then I'll send you the notes for today and then all the updates that we made. And then I'll do some follow-up and just send those out. But it comes as an email just with notes.
Okay.
And
And
Ms.
then is there
Leonard,
something that I should review in preparation for the next meeting?
Well, I think what I'll do is I will send out what we possibly can discuss next week. So give you just time to read it, digest it, and then we'll start from the top and we'll just go down. Yeah,
Fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
certainly.
And
Okay.
Kathy, Miss Micah also recaps us with some minutes and notes as well too. So we'll be sure that you get included on that email loop as well.
you're included on that one, Miss Leonard. So you
Okay.
should, I have your email on that one. I'll make sure that Captain Hubbard has yours too for his distribution as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, everyone. You can expect an email from me. And I appreciate your
Okay.
time.
All right, that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone. Always appreciate your time and contributions to this group. And we will catch you all next week, same time, same place.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night,
All
everyone.
right,
Thank
take
you.
care. Good night.